All right, so today we're diving deep into the world of UK politics. Specifically, we're looking at Rachel Reeves, the UK's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. And don't worry, we're not about to bore you with some dry economic lecture.
Oh, no, not at all.
We're taking all our insights straight from her Wikipedia page. You never know what hidden gems you might find in there.
You'd be surprised what you can uncover with a simple Wikipedia deep dive.
Oh, absolutely. It's like going beyond those carefully crafted official bios and getting a glimpse of, like, the real person behind the policies,
Exactly, a more human side.
Yeah, and let me tell you, Reeves' story is anything but boring. We're talking chess prodigy turned political powerhouse.
That's quite the combination.
Right, imagine, like, this woman was competing in chess at a national level when she was just a kid.
Wow. That really speaks to her strategic mind, thinking several steps ahead.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like, can you picture little Rachel just, like, destroying her opponents on the chessboard? Talk about a sign of things to come.
And, when you consider her background, both her parents were teachers, it makes sense.
That emphasis on education, right?
Exactly. Critical thinking. It must have shaped her from a young age.
It's like she was destined for a life of deep thinking and making those high-stakes decisions. But hold on, before she was battling it out in House of Commons, she was busy stacking up some serious academic credentials.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
We're talking PPE at Oxford, a master's in economics from LSE. This woman was clearly not messing around.
Impressive.
And that's not all. Before politics, she had quite the diverse career path. The Bank of England, HBOS. She even had an interview at Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs.
Can you imagine, like, turning down Goldman Sachs?
It says something about her commitment to public service, doesn't it?
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like she deliberately chose the harder path. I mean, who says no to potentially making millions in finance?
Right. But it seems like shaping policy and making a real difference was more important to her than any paycheck.
Definitely a testament to her convictions. But let's be real, politics is a tough game. Her early battles were no walk in the park.
What do you mean?
She had 2 unsuccessful runs for Parliament before finally winning the Leeds West seat in 2010.
So persistence was key.
Talk about perseverance. Losing not once but twice would make most people give up. But Reeves kept going. She clearly learned from those defeats because when she finally got to Parliament, she was ready to make her mark.
And she certainly did. She climbed the ranks of the Labour Party pretty quickly.
Holding key positions like, Shadow Pensions Minister?
Yeah, that, and Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. She wasn't afraid to shake things up a bit either.
Oh, really? How so?
Her stance on benefits, for example, she proposed stricter requirements for recipients.
Interesting. So not just following the party line blindly.
Exactly. She had her own ideas, even if they ruffled some feathers.
That independent streak is pretty impressive. It's one thing to climb the ladder, but it's another to do it while staying true to yourself. And then there's that interesting chapter with Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, their relationship.
Let's just say they weren't exactly on the same page politically.
Quite different approaches.
But instead of causing drama, she strategically stepped back, becoming chair of the Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy Committee.
A smart move.
Right. It's like she was using that time to sharpen her skills, gain expertise, and wait for the right moment to jump back in.
And that moment came with Keir Starmer.
Talk about a comeback. He brought her back into the fold as Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. A clear sign that he saw her as a key player in shaping Labour's economic policy.
Absolutely. And with that, Reeves was ready to introduce her vision for a modern supply-side economics, which she later called securonomics.
Securonomics, what's that all about? Some kind of secret economic code?
Well, not quite. But it was a bold move, a challenge to traditional economic thinking in UK politics.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. What's the essence of this securonomics thing?
It's about shifting the focus, not just boosting GDP, but creating a more resilient economy that works for everyone. Investing in the foundations like infrastructure, education, skills training, and tackling issues like inequality and climate change.
So not just a bigger economy, but a better one. More secure, more equitable. Sounds ambitious, but how did she plan to actually put this into action?
One key component was a proposed $28 billion climate investment plan, a major commitment to tackling the climate crisis and creating green jobs.
A big plan indeed, but did it actually happen?
Well, as the general election approached, concerns about economic stability and avoiding criticism led to some scaling back.
Politics, always throwing a wrench in the works.
It's a balancing act, sticking to principles while navigating the political landscape. But even with those setbacks, Labor managed to win the 2024 general election, and Rachel Reeves made history.
Becoming the first female chancellor. A landmark moment.
Absolutely. But the celebrations were short-lived. She inherited an economy facing some serious challenges, including that infamous black hole she claimed was left by the previous government.
Talk about being thrown in the deep end. Not only breaking barriers, but also facing a mountain of economic problems from day one. So how did she tackle these immediate challenges? What were her first moves as chancellor?
She hit the ground running, established the National Wealth Fund aimed at investing in long-term growth, made adjustments to winter fuel payments, announced public sector pay rises, and started grappling with that daunting task of balancing the books. It was a whirlwind start to her chancellorship.
Sounds like it. But we've only just scratched the surface. Up next, we'll delve into that controversial first budget, those record-breaking tax rises, and some decisions that raised a few eyebrows. That first budget was a big moment for Reeves, a chance to really put her stamp on the UK economy. But as we hinted earlier, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it?
No, not at all. It was a bold budget full of tough decisions and big changes.
It sounds like she came out swinging. What were the key highlights?
Well, the biggest headline was those tax rises. Reeves introduced the largest tax increases since 1993. It was a move that really shook things up.
Wow, 1993, that's a long time ago. What was the thinking behind such drastic increases?
It was a multi-pronged approach, really. Firstly, she needed to address that budget black hole she inherited. Remember, the economy wasn't exactly in great shape.
Right, fixing those problems requires money.
Exactly. And secondly, these tax increases were a key part of funding her securonomics vision.
Ah, securonomics. So it wasn't just about balancing the books, but investing in the future.
Exactly. It was about funding those long-term investments in infrastructure, green technologies, education, all those things that build a strong and sustainable economy.
It sounds like a gamble, though. Big investments, big tax rises, big potential rewards, but also big risks.
There was definitely a lot of debate about it. Some praised her for taking decisive action, others worried about the impact on people's wallets and the overall economy. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, was particularly critical.
What were their concerns?
They were worried about the impact on wage growth and the overall health of the economy. They argued that these tax rises could actually stifle growth and hurt the very people securonomics was supposed to help.
So a classic economic debate. Short-term pain for long-term gain. But with a lot of uncertainty about whether the gamble will pay off, I bet the opposition had a field day with this.
Oh, absolutely. They jumped at the chance to criticize her, accusing her of burdening ordinary people with taxes while pushing her own ideological agenda.
Politics as usual. But there was something else that caused even more controversy, wasn't there? That time, Reeves gave a sneak peek of the budget to some U.S. journalists.
Oh, yeah, that didn't go down well at all. Remember, the ministerial code is very clear that budget details should be kept confidential until the official announcement in Parliament.
Right, it's supposed to be a big reveal.
Exactly. So, by sharing information beforehand, even if it was unintentional, she opened herself up to accusations of breaking the rules and undermining transparency.
Not a good look for a chancellor who's already facing criticism for those tax hikes. Did she ever explain why she did it?
She claimed it was just a casual conversation, not a formal briefing, but the damage was done. The optics weren't great.
It just goes to show, even the most carefully crafted policies can be undermined by missteps and miscommunications. Perception matters, especially in politics.
Absolutely. But despite the budget drama and the controversies, Reeves continued to push forward with her agenda, tackling a whole range of issues both domestically and internationally. Let's move beyond the budget now and explore some of her other key stances and actions as chancellor.
Okay, I'm curious to see how her securonomics vision played out in practice beyond those tax hikes. Did she actually manage to make progress on those long-term investments?
Well, it wasn't always easy. The economic landscape was always changing. Global events threw curveballs, and there were political pressures to deal with. But she did make some significant moves.
For example, give us some specifics.
One of her early actions was establishing the National Wealth Fund. This was a key part of her plan to invest in long-term economic growth, focusing on areas like renewable energy, infrastructure, and new technologies.
So putting that securonomics money to work, how did that go?
It wasn't without its critics. Some questioned the initial investments, arguing they weren't effective or that the money could have been used better elsewhere.
And I imagine there were also concerns about transparency.
Oh, absolutely. Calls for greater accountability and oversight in how the fund was managed. But beyond the National Wealth Fund, She also tackled some more immediate challenges.
Like what?
Well, she made adjustments to winter fuel payments, which was controversial, and she announced public sector pay rises, trying to address concerns about stagnant wages and boost morale among essential workers.
So, trying to strike a balance. Fiscal responsibility versus supporting those who need it most. It's a tough job.
It is. And of course, there was that ongoing task of balancing the books, dealing with that budget black hole she talked about. That meant making tough decisions, cutting back in certain areas, and constantly battling to keep spending under control.
Sounds like a never-ending juggling act. Keep everyone happy while making sure the economy doesn't collapse.
It's a tough job, that's for sure. But beyond the economics, there's a lot more to Reeves. Her stance on various social issues offers a fascinating glimpse into her worldview and the kind of society she wants to build.
Okay, so we've tackled the economics, those bold budget moves, and even that little slip-up with the U.S. journalists. But now I want to dive into something a bit different. Rachel Reeves' stance on various social issues. It's a chance to get a better understanding of her values, the things that drive her decision-making beyond just the pure economics.
It's a fascinating aspect to explore, isn't it? Because it reveals a lot about her worldview, the kind of society she envisions, and how she approaches those complex, often controversial issues that we grapple with as a nation.
Exactly. And one of those hot-button issues that always seems to be in the headlines is transgender rights. It's a topic that often divides public opinion, and I'm curious to know where Reeves stands on this.
It's a nuanced issue, and her stance reflects that. She's made statements that suggest a balancing act, a desire to acknowledge different perspectives while trying to find a middle ground.
Give us some specifics. What has she actually said or done that reveals her position?
Well, there was that comment she made about it not being transphobic to say only women have a cervix. It sparked a lot of debate, with some praising her for speaking frankly and others criticizing her for being insensitive. But then, on the other hand, she's also supported policies that would restrict the rights of transgender women, like banning them from competing in women's sports or using women's spaces.
So it sounds like she's trying to navigate a really sensitive and complex issue, perhaps appealing to different segments of the population without fully aligning with either extreme. It's a tough position to be in, especially for a politician who's constantly in the spotlight.
Absolutely. And this careful balancing act, this desire to acknowledge different viewpoints while also sticking to her own convictions, is also evident in her views on assisted dying.
Ah, yes, another ethically challenging issue. It's a topic that often evokes strong emotions and deeply held beliefs.
Exactly. And Reeves has spoken about her own personal struggles with this issue, particularly in light of her family's experience with Alzheimer's and dementia.
So a personal connection to the issue, which adds another layer of complexity to her stance.
Right. She's expressed understanding for those who support assisted dying, acknowledging the suffering that some people endure and the desire for control over their own end-of-life decisions. But she's also voiced concerns about potential pressure on vulnerable individuals, the risk of abuse, and the need for strong safeguards.
So again, we see that cautious approach, that recognition of the sensitive nature of the issue and the potential for unintended consequences. It's not a black and white issue for her, and her stance reflects that complexity.
Now, let's shift gears from these deeply personal issues to the global stage.
Yeah.
When it comes to foreign policy, Reeves has been a vocal critic of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, condemning it in no uncertain terms.
A strong stance against aggression, for sure. But has she always been aligned with, say, the U.S. on foreign policy matters?
Not necessarily. While she generally supports a strong relationship with the U.S., recognizing their role as a key ally, she hasn't shied away from expressing disagreement when their actions conflict with her own principles.
Can you give us an example of that?
Well, remember when the U.S. decided to send cluster bombs to Ukraine? Reeves was among those who voiced deep concern about that decision, citing the long-term risks to civilians and the potential for environmental damage. It was a clear indication that she wasn't afraid to speak out, even when it meant going against a close ally.
It shows a certain independence of thought, a willingness to stand up for what she believes in, even when it might ruffle some feathers.
Exactly. And this independent streak is also evident in her approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict, a conflict that has long been a source of tension and division within the Labor Party.
It's a delicate issue, for sure, and one that often forces politicians to choose sides. Where does Reeves fall on this spectrum?
Well, she's a known supporter of Israel, having served as a vice chair of Labor Friends of Israel and spoken out in support of their policies on multiple occasions.
So a clear leaning towards the Israeli perspective. How does that square with the Labor Party's historically more pro-Palestinian stance?
It's another example of that balancing act we've seen before, that attempt to navigate a complex issue with no easy answers. She stated that she wants to see a two-state solution, with a Palestinian state existing alongside a safe and secure Israel. But she's also been critical of what she sees as anti-Israel bias and condemned certain pro-Palestinian events and groups.
So trying to find that middle ground, acknowledging the complexities of the conflict while also remaining true to her own convictions. It's a position that's bound to draw criticism from those who hold more extreme views on either side.
Absolutely. But it's a reflection of her overall approach to politics: thoughtful, pragmatic, and willing to engage with the nuances of complex issues.
Now let's bring it back to the UK and that ever-present elephant in the room, Brexit. It's been a defining issue for British politics in recent years, and I'm curious to know how Reeves has navigated this turbulent landscape.
Well, remember, she campaigned for Remain in the 2016 referendum. But after the vote, she adopted a more pragmatic stance, accepting the outcome and shifting her focus to making the best of the situation.
A realist, acknowledging that the decision had been made and it was time to move forward. Did she completely abandon her pro-EU stance?
Not entirely. She still believes in the importance of close cooperation with the EU, particularly on issues like trade and security. But she's also acknowledged the concerns that drove the Leave vote, particularly around immigration.
A key issue for many Brexit voters. How has she addressed those concerns?
She's taken a more cautious approach to immigration, advocating for stricter controls and a focus on skilled migration. It's a balancing act, trying to address those concerns without completely shutting the door on immigration, which, as we know, also brings significant economic and social benefits.
Right, it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance between national interests and global interconnectedness.
And finally, we can't talk about foreign policy without mentioning China, a rising global power that presents both opportunities and challenges for the UK. Reeves has been vocal about her concerns regarding China's growing influence, accusing them of unbalancing the old global order and advocating for a reduction in the UK's economic dependence on them.
So a more cautious, perhaps even hawkish stance towards China. But hasn't she also acknowledged the importance of maintaining trade relations?
Yes, she has. She recognizes that completely decoupling from China economically would be unrealistic and potentially harmful. So it's about finding that balance again, managing the risks while also maximizing the benefits of engagement.
It seems like that's a recurring theme for Reeves, finding that middle ground, that balance between competing priorities and perspectives. It's not always easy, and it doesn't always satisfy everyone, but it suggests a thoughtful approach to policymaking, one that's informed by both pragmatism and principle.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even in the world of politics where things often seem black and white, there's always room for nuance, for careful consideration, and for a willingness to engage with the complexities of the issues at hand.
Well said. But before we wrap up, I have to bring up that little tidbit we uncovered during our Wikipedia deep dive, Reeves's personal faith. It's not something you hear every day about a high-profile politician, especially in today's increasingly secular world.
It's a fascinating detail, isn't it? And it reminds us that even those in the public eye, those who shape our policies and lead our nation, are complex individuals with their own personal beliefs and values that inform their actions.
Absolutely. So there you have it. Rachel Reeves, the chess prodigy turned history-making chancellor, is a woman of many dimensions: strategic, ambitious, compassionate, and yes, even a bit surprising at times. We've explored her journey, her policies, her controversies, and those personal beliefs that offer a glimpse into the woman behind the headlines.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, and as her story continues to unfold, it'll be interesting to see how those diverse influences, her intellect, her political savvy, and her personal convictions, shape her leadership and ultimately determine her legacy.
Well said. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep digging deeper. There's always more to learn, more to discover, and more to understand about the world around us, and sometimes all it takes is a simple Wikipedia page to spark that journey of discovery. Until next time, happy learning.